Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates appeared before the House Oversight Committee today for closed-door testimony about his ties to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein after his name appeared hundreds of times in the Epstein files. Gates has not been accused of wrongdoing and said he knew nothing of Epstein's crimes, earlier telling reporters he hopes his testimony helps find justice for Epstein's survivors. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman James Walkinshaw of Virginia, who sits on the House Oversight Committee and was able to question Mr. Gates today. Congressman, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start big picture. What was your biggest takeaway? You were able to question Mr. Gates. What came of it?
Well, Mr. Gates' testimony today, I think, was consistent with what he said publicly about his interactions with Epstein, the meetings and dinners that they had, where he hoped that Epstein would be serious about supporting his public health and philanthropic efforts. He professed no knowledge of the crimes that Epstein was committing, and said that he was not ever even introduced to any of Epstein's assistants, some of the young women that we now know Epstein was abusing.
And are you confident that Mr. Gates shared the whole truth with the committee?
I found him to be credible. I didn't get the sense that he was hiding anything. Obviously, it's impossible to know whether in the back of his mind, as he was having dinner with Epstein or meeting with Epstein, even after Epstein was convicted of a sex crime, whether in the back of his mind he had suspicions that some of the young women who were Epstein's assistants were actually being abused. That's impossible to know. But he did answer our questions. Everything he said, as far as I can tell, is consistent with what's in the files and in the public record.
One of the aspects that does seem a little inconsistent, Mr. Gates said he didn't fully understand the extent of Mr. Epstein's crimes when he engaged with him on philanthropic work back in 2011. That was after Epstein was convicted of soliciting a minor. How do you square that?
Yeah, he said he knew that Epstein had been convicted of some kind of sexual misconduct, but that he didn't research the details of it, and he regretted not researching the details of it. Obviously, that is a huge, massive error in judgment, not just to not research the details, but to have this relationship or engagement with Epstein even after you knew he was convicted of that crime. He acknowledged that as an error in judgment that he regrets.
Let me ask you about something that Oversight Chairman James Comer said. He is now saying he wants Attorney General nominee Todd Blanche to testify in July. Let me play a little bit of what he had to say today.
Now, let me be very clear. Todd Blanche came in a month ago. He came in with Pam Bondi to answer questions from the Oversight Committee, and the Democrats stormed out and ran to you all to try to be the first to get on MSNBC and talk about their outrage. What a missed opportunity for the Democrats.
How do you respond to that, Congressman?
Well, look, Chairman Comer tried to arrange for Pam Bondi and her sidekick at the time, Todd Blanche, to speak behind closed doors in an unofficial briefing with no transcript, no record. The media, the world, the American public would never have known what was said in that room if Democrats participated in it. That's why we walked out, because we want to end this cover-up. We want transparency. When Todd Blanche comes before our committee in July, not only should there be a transcript, but it should be on video so the American people can see and judge for themselves whether he's telling the truth about his role in this cover-up. James Comer doesn't want to see that happen. Democrats like myself on the committee do.
Have you gotten assurances there will be a transcript, in fact?
We have not gotten any assurances. Just today, we learned that Chairman Comer decided, after getting pressured by Democrats, to ask Todd Blanche to come in. We know nothing about the circumstances. We're going to be pushing for it to be videotaped under oath so the world can see and judge for themselves.
All right, I do want to ask you about this new reporting from Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman at the New York Times. They detail a Situation Room meeting with administration officials about how exactly to deal with the Epstein files. I want to read you part of this. They say, quote, behind the scenes, the Epstein crisis was paralyzing the Trump administration to a far greater extent than the public knew. It was consuming the highest ranks of the administration. What was your reaction to reading that? And do you think that administration officials need to come and be questioned by the committee?
I think it details the desperate efforts at the highest levels of the White House to cover this up. And what are they covering up? They're covering up Donald Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And Donald Trump has lied time after time after time. He said he had no relationship. We learned by some accounts they were best friends, spent a lot of time together. He said he never flew on Epstein's jets. We learned from the files he flew on the jets 4 times. The files include allegations against Donald Trump, uncorroborated allegations, but allegations. He continues to lie about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and the White House has worked for a year now to cover it up. It is absolutely outrageous what they have done.
Congressman, I want to shift gears here a little bit, turn to the Senate race in Maine. Senate candidate Graham Plattner won his primary last night, as you know, after facing a swirl of controversies, including accusations of being physically threatening to ex-girlfriends, repeatedly lying to his campaign staff. He's denied claims of physical violence. Are you comfortable with Mr. Plattner representing the Democratic Party in Maine?
Well, when I look at candidates for office or candidates for any job who have made mistakes in their past, the question for me is, have you acknowledged and taken responsibility for those mistakes and grown as a human being? I think Graham Plattner has demonstrated he's taken some responsibility. He hopefully has grown as a human being. You can contrast that with Ken Paxton, who's running for the Senate in Texas, who was impeached by his own Republicans in the Texas legislature because he's wildly corrupt, and he continues to deny that and take no responsibility for his actions. So Graham Plattner needs to continue to take responsibility and to grow as a person. I think if he does that, Mainers will respond well to it in November.
Well, he had initially said basically that all of the controversial information about him had come out, and then it was just in the past few weeks that there were yet new allegations that he had mistreated and been aggressive toward ex-girlfriends. Does that, for you, raise concerns about his credibility?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think we have to take seriously those allegations and his treatment of women that he was in relationships with. Obviously, for me, any corroboration of domestic violence or abuse is a red line. I don't think that's where we are right now, but he's going to have to continue to answer those questions and be open and honest about both his past and who he is now as a human being.
Just very quickly, as a Democrat, and obviously Democrats want to win back not just the House but the Senate, how concerned are you that there could be more information that comes out about him that's damaging?
It's hard to say. Obviously, a fair amount of information has come out. Republicans could be sitting on more information. Look, there's a long time between now and November. I think in all of these Senate races, there are going to be surprises. I think we'll probably get more information about Ken Paxton and the depths of his corruption in Texas, the circumstances of his divorce and some of the allegations made against him. That could happen in Texas. Could it happen in Maine? A little bit more, perhaps.
All right, Congressman Walkinshaw, thank you so much for your time, your perspective. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.